Millionaire accuses pregnant wife of cheating, but she plays his affair video with mistress in court. They said billionaire tycoon Maxwell Harrington lived in a world of unimaginable privilege, his name etched into skyscrapers and exclusive clubs across the globe. His marriage to the elegant, expectant Tessa Harrington was the final piece of a charmed life, or so it seemed. Yet behind penthouse walls and polite society smiles, suspicion and deceit festered. Whispers claimed Tessa's unborn child belonged to another man. Rumors escalated until Maxwell, in a desperate bid to salvage his reputation, dragged her before the courts with shocking accusations. But Tessa arrived armed with something far more explosive: a hidden video capturing Maxwell's own scandalous affair. Maxwell Harrington was the kind of man who commanded a room by merely stepping into it. Tall, dark-haired, and sharp-jawed, he carried himself with the elegance bred from long generations of wealth, though his particular brand of wealth was largely self-made. While the Harrington name had roots in old money, Maxwell had multiplied the family fortune tenfold through savvy investments in real estate, technology startups, and a budding media empire. He and Tessa, however, seemed to come from different worlds. She was an orphan who rose through foster care, eventually winning a scholarship to the prestigious Harrington University, partly funded by the Harrington family's philanthropic arm. There, Tessa excelled academically, her intellect rivaled only by her quiet determination to better herself. Maxwell first met her at a charity dinner on campus. The spark, at least from Tessa's side, felt genuine, a shy girl dazzled by this man's confidence and the fairy tale swirl of high society. Maxwell's interest in her was rumored to be a mix of genuine affection and his father's suggestion to find someone fresh, unconnected to our circles, so you'll know she loves you for who you are. Their wedding was a grand affair, staged at a centuries-old cathedral in Boston, with horse-drawn carriages and paparazzi swarming outside. Tessa wore a hand-embroidered gown that took 6 months to create, while Maxwell cut an imposing figure in a bespoke tuxedo. The reception at the Harrington estate was a star-studded event, featuring politicians, celebrities, and the ever-present swirl of fortune hunters orbiting the Harrington orbit. Yet, amid the champagne toasts and fireworks, Tessa believed she had found not just a wealthy benefactor, but a soulmate who treated her as an equal. For a while, everything was blissful. Maxwell introduced Tessa to board members of Harrington Global, gave her a seat at philanthropic boards, and indulged her passion for children's education charities. She, in turn, brought a freshness to the Harrington brand. Society pages were abuzz with how the dashing mogul had married for love, not just for mergers or beneficial alliances. Unbeknownst to Tessa, cracks in Maxwell's polished facade had been forming for years. He had grown up watching his parents' marriage disintegrate behind closed doors, taught to preserve the Harrington image at any cost. Suspicion came to him like second nature. Beneath his kind gestures simmered a controlling need to script every aspect of his life, and Tessa was no exception. When Tessa discovered she was pregnant, the news spread excitement among the wealthy set. A lavish baby shower was planned, replete with a 4-tiered cake, embossed invitations, and swan-shaped floral arrangements. Maxwell appeared proud and affectionate in public, one hand protectively splayed over Tessa's small baby bump. Her eyes shone with naive hope for the future. Yet behind the scenes, signs of trouble emerged. Maxwell's frequent late-night work sessions, cryptic phone calls, and sudden changes in temperament left Tessa uneasy. Was it anxiety over fatherhood, or something more ominous? He became overprotective to the point of paranoia, demanding constant updates on her whereabouts, even though Tessa rarely ventured far from their penthouse. When Tessa's friend from college, Rachel Townsend, visited for lunch, Maxwell's mood darkened at the mere mention of Tessa's old male classmates. He brushed it off as typical paternal worry, joking that Tessa might run off with a professor. She laughed it away, never imagining how viciously that joke would one day resurface. In the hush of that penthouse, Tessa occasionally felt lonely. Maxwell had grown distant, only turning on his charm when they stood in front of cameras or attended high society functions. She chalked it up to his demanding schedule. He was a mogul, after all. She had no idea his insecurities were feeding a destructive jealousy that would soon spiral out of control. Their friends and the tabloids remained, enthralled by the fairy tale image of the Harrington marriage. If Tessa sometimes felt like an imposter in the gilded rooms and haute couture dresses, she consoled herself by imagining the child growing inside her would unify them as a family. She had no inkling that Maxwell was on the verge of orchestrating a scandal so explosive. It would threaten not just her place in the Harrington dynasty, but her own sense of self. Months before Tessa discovered the extent of Maxwell's suspicions, events were quietly set in motion. One evening, Maxwell returned home later than usual from a business dinner. Tessa, in a powder blue maternity gown, was reading a parenting book on the couch. At the sound of his footsteps, she rushed to greet him, her face lighting up with relief. But Maxwell seemed preoccupied. He loosened his tie, barely making eye contact. "How was the dinner?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Fine," he replied, sipping a glass of scotch from the bar cart. Something in his tone made Tessa swallow her next question. That night, Maxwell retreated to his home office, claiming he needed to finish some urgent documents. Tessa decided not to follow him. He'd grown prickly about her presence during work hours. Instead, she sighed and went to bed alone, thinking her husband had an unusually heavy workload. If only she had known, Maxwell wasn't reviewing business reports. He was poring over Tessa's phone records that he had quietly acquired, combing through every unknown number with a paranoid eye. The cause for Maxwell's deepening jealousy traced back to an old ghost, his father, Gregory Harrington. Gregory had been a notorious philanderer whose affairs destroyed the Harrington family's unity and triggered Maxwell's mother's early demise from heartbreak and anxiety. From a young age, Maxwell had internalized the message, "Never trust your spouse wholeheartedly." He applied it ironically, for though he strived not to become his father, his childhood trauma had turned him into a suspicious partner capable of the same cruelty. Matters took a darker turn when Maxwell discovered a particular text on Tessa's phone from a man named James Carter, an old friend from Tessa's foster care days. The text read innocently enough, "Just wanted to say hi and congrats. Heard about the baby news. Wishing you the best." But in Maxwell's mind, this benign message sparked a firestorm. He latched onto the idea that Tessa could be reconnecting with old flames, or possibly lying about the baby's paternity. His attempts to discuss the topic were veiled as half-hearted jokes about paternity tests, which Tessa dismissed with an uneasy smile. Tessa's best friend, Rachel Townsend, sensed the tension. Over coffee, Tessa confessed, "He's grown so suspicious. I never gave him a reason not to trust me. It's as if he's looking for something to be angry about." Rachel gave her a concerned look. "You need to set boundaries, Tess. If you allow him to keep questioning your loyalty without proof, it'll only get worse." But Tessa believed love could conquer Maxwell's doubts. She reasoned that once the baby arrived, he'd see her devotion and calm down. She never dreamed Maxwell's insecurities were fanned by the shadows of his family history, turning him into the unrelenting investigator of her every move. Around the same time, Maxwell's legitimate business dinners became peppered with clandestine meetings. He started spending odd evenings in discreet midtown lounges with a woman named Victoria Hayes, an associate from Harrington Media. Officially, they were discussing new directions for a TV channel he owned. In reality, Maxwell found an outlet for his paranoia and frustrations. Victoria, ambitious and cunning, listened to Maxwell's concerns with apparent empathy while making subtle moves of her own to gain his confidence. She saw an opportunity to become indispensable, perhaps even more than a mere business associate. Thus, seeds of jealousy laid the foundation for an epic betrayal. Maxwell zeroed in on Tessa's every conversation, phone call, and text, convinced she might be unfaithful. Tessa, unaware, believed it all to be the stress of fatherhood looming. And silently, in the background, Victoria's presence grew stronger as she fueled Maxwell's anxieties, waiting for her chance to become more than just a confidant. One weekend, Tessa organized a small charity event at the Harrington estate, raising funds to provide scholarships for orphans, reflecting her own difficult beginnings. The lawn filled with well-dressed guests, a local jazz quartet played under a gazebo, and cameras from high-end lifestyle magazines captured every detail. Maxwell arrived late from a separate meeting, his face set in a grim expression. Tessa greeted him with a warm, "I'm so glad you're here. The event is going wonderfully, and the baby," she patted her swelling stomach, "kicked quite a bit today." Maxwell nodded absent-mindedly, scanning the crowd. "Who else is here?" he asked, his voice clipped. "Many donors, a few old friends," Tessa replied. "Even James Carter showed up to support." "Remember, we talked about him, my friend from foster care?" Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "Yes, you've mentioned him a few times." Tessa didn't catch the edge in his tone as she led him toward a group of donors, but an unease pricked at her subconscious. Maxwell's handshake with James was ice-cold. James tried to engage him in polite conversation, praising Tessa's philanthropic efforts, but Maxwell's forced smile barely concealed a glower. Tessa, chatting with other guests, was unaware that Maxwell had excused himself within minutes, leaving James standing there, confused. Later, Tessa found Maxwell alone by the estate's rose garden. She approached, heart buoyed from the day's success, only to find a stormy expression on his face. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. Maxwell sneered. "I see you had a good time with your old friend James. You were laughing and touching his arm, right?" "I saw that from across the lawn." Tessa stared, stunned. "Maxwell, I was hosting." "I greet everyone that way," he cut her off, voice low. "Don't lie. I've seen your texts, Tessa. You two go way back, and maybe you never let go of him. Maybe that's why you got pregnant so conveniently." Her jaw dropped. She forced a breath, her heart pounding. "Are you insinuating this baby isn't yours?" she whispered, tears burning in her eyes. He shrugged with exaggerated calm. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." Anger flared beneath her hurt. "How dare you?" "I've been faithful, absolutely devoted," Maxwell scoffed, stepping closer, eyes blazing with an irrational fury. "So you say, but I know how old flames can rekindle, Tessa. I've seen it happen in my family." Tessa's tears spilled over. "I'm not your father's mistress, Maxwell. I'm your wife. And this baby is ours. I can't believe you'd think otherwise." Guests passed by, glimpsing this tense confrontation, quickly averting their gazes. The hush of the rose garden seemed to amplify Tessa's ragged breaths. She wanted to scream at him, but her voice trembled from heartbreak instead. Maxwell remained cold, an unsettling swirl of distrust in his eyes. He turned away, muttering, "If there's nothing to hide, you won't mind a paternity test after the baby's born." Then he stalked off, leaving Tessa trembling. She wanted to chase after him, demand an immediate apology, but humiliation rooted her feet to the spot. For the rest of the event, Tessa wore a mask of composure, but inside she was shattered. She found herself retreating early to her bedroom, ignoring the guests' goodbyes. Maxwell didn't come to check on her. That night, Tessa sobbed into her pillow, both furious and hurt. that her husband, once a loving partner, could stoop to such an unfounded accusation. Yet she still had no inkling that his obsession would soon spiral far beyond a single heated argument, culminating in a public, devastating legal battle. In the days following that charity event, Maxwell drifted even further from Tessa. Rather than seeking resolution, he fell under the sway of Victoria Hayes. On the surface, Victoria was just an executive at Harrington Media, but privately, she had become Maxwell's confidant. Rumors of her closeness to him circulated among the staff, though no one dared question the boss's personal relationships. Victoria's background was a rags to riches tale, almost as dramatic as Tessa's. Born in a small town, she clawed her way to the top with ruthless ambition, leveraging her intelligence and uncanny ability to read people. She sensed Maxwell's need for validation, especially regarding his insecurities about Tessa. Victoria artfully played the part of an understanding friend, feeding Maxwell's suspicions while offering support. One evening, Maxwell invited Victoria for a private dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline. Candlelight flickered over polished silverware, and a soft breeze ruffled her designer shawl. She leaned forward, feigning concern. "You seem so stressed, Maxwell. You know you can talk to me about anything," he exhaled, swirling the wine in his glass. Everything was fine until Tessa started acting differently. "She's meeting old friends, laughing too easily with people I don't know. That James guy. I can't shake the feeling something's going on." Victoria arched an eyebrow sympathetically. "Have you considered that Tessa might not be the wholesome person you thought? After all, you've only known her for a few years. Sometimes people hide secrets." Maxwell nodded grimly, his knuckles white around the stem of his glass. "I just can't bear the thought that I might be raising another man's child. It haunts me." Victoria placed her hand over his, an intimate gesture that caused him to flinch but not pull away. "If you truly suspect something, you should find out the truth. You can't let a potential betrayal ruin your life." Her voice was soft but carried an undertone of incitement. "You deserve happiness, Maxwell." He looked up, meeting her gaze. For a moment, something flickered between them, a dangerous mix of vulnerability and attraction. Victoria recognized this window and pressed on. "I've known people in your position. If you need help, evidence, or a plan to protect your interests, I can connect you with the right people. Just say the word." Maxwell hesitated. A pang of guilt, maybe. Tessa was, after all, his wife, presumably carrying his child. But suspicion and heartbreak overshadowed decency. "What do you suggest?" he asked quietly. Victoria smiled reassuringly. "I can put you in touch with an investigative firm. If Tessa is innocent, you'll have peace of mind. If not," she let the sentence dangle. The implication was clear: get proof, then destroy her credibility. That night, Maxwell returned to the penthouse where Tessa lay asleep, her growing belly a testament to the child they once dreamed of raising together. He watched her for a moment, confusion swirling. Was he truly prepared to spy on her, to transform their marriage into a battlefield of accusations? In the end, he told himself it was the only way to find peace. Little did he realize the magnitude of the betrayal he was enacting, or that Victoria's true interest might extend far beyond mere help. She had her own desires to replace Tessa's role in Maxwell's life, in his bed and in the Harrington empire. Tessa felt the rift widen with each passing day. Maxwell came home late, offering curt explanations about emergency board meetings or investor dinners. On weekends, he often left for out-of-town trips, citing expansions in other cities. Tessa sensed an undercurrent of hostility. Whenever they did interact, snide remarks about her spending habits or insinuations that her friends were freeloaders. The baby was a constant reminder that a new life would soon arrive. Tessa's obstetrician, Dr. Catherine Lund, noticed her stress levels skyrocketing. "You must be mindful," Dr. Lund cautioned gently. "Elevated stress is unhealthy for both you and the baby. Is everything all right at home?" Tessa forced a smile, hiding her trembling hands. "Just the usual demands of, a big family name. We'll be fine." She couldn't bring herself to disclose Maxwell's accusations or the sense that her marriage was crumbling. In a moment of weakness, Tessa decided to confide in James Carter, her childhood friend. They met for lunch at a modest cafe far from the Harrington sphere of influence. James listened, his brow furrowed with concern, as Tessa described Maxwell's hostility and groundless suspicions of an affair between them. "Why would he think that?" James asked, shocked. "We've never been more than friends, and we've barely even talked, except for the occasional messages." Tessa's eyes stung with tears. "He's convinced I'm hiding something. It's like he's waiting for proof I've betrayed him, so he can." She paused, biting her lip. "I don't know, maybe divorce me without losing face, or discredit me so he can keep the baby. I'm scared, James." James reached across the table to squeeze her hand reassuringly. "You're not alone. I'll help however I can, even if that means testifying. He's the one who's mistaken here, not you." Unbeknownst to them, a private investigator hired by Maxwell lurked in a corner booth, snapping photographs. The angles made Tessa's tearful face, and James's comforting gesture looked suspiciously intimate. Within hours, Maxwell had those images in his email, courtesy of Victoria's connections. His worst fears seemed confirmed in those still frames, Tessa holding hands with James, wiping tears. In his mania, he refused to consider context. That evening, when Tessa returned to the penthouse, Maxwell was already waiting. The living room lights were off, casting his silhouette in menacing shadows. He switched on a lamp as she stepped in, thrusting a stack of photographs toward her with shaking hands. "Explain these," he spat, fury twisting his features. Tessa's eyes darted over the pictures, her stomach turning. "This, James, he's just my friend," she stammered. "I was upset. I needed someone to talk to." Maxwell's scoff was thick with disdain. "Spare me the lies. The evidence is right here." He tossed the photos on the marble floor. "I have investigators, Tessa. You can't hide anything from me." "Fighting tears," Tessa shouted. "Then ask them to investigate your own lies like these twisted snapshots." "You know they prove nothing," he advanced, voice trembling with rage. "They prove you've broken my trust. And if you're sneaking around like this, who's to say that baby is even mine?" Tessa's heart pounded. She placed her hand protectively over her belly. "How can you do this to your own family? You're scaring me, Maxwell." His face was unreadable for a moment. Then, in a chillingly calm tone, he said, "You've brought this on yourself." "I won't be a fool, Tessa. If this child isn't mine, I'll make sure the world knows you're nothing but a gold digger." She fled to the bedroom, sobbing. Never had she felt so alone, so cornered. Little did she suspect that Maxwell's next move would be even more drastic. He was planning to take his allegations public in a legal forum, determined to paint her as an unfaithful wife. And Tessa, though wounded, would soon find the means to defend herself in a way that nobody saw coming. Within a week, Tessa received a shocking summons to appear in court. The documents, delivered by a uniformed process server, accused her of infidelity, emotional cruelty, and potential fraud over the child's paternity. Maxwell was requesting an immediate hearing to protect his property and inheritance rights. The media pounced on the story like vultures to carrion. Harrington's pregnant wife, publicly accused of cheating, this was the scandal of the year. Paparazzi crowded the sidewalk outside their penthouse, and tabloids ran headlines such as "Golden Wife" or "Golden Lie." Tessa stayed indoors, the curtains drawn, her phone buzzing incessantly with calls from reporters hoping for a statement. At first, she was paralyzed by horror. Her own husband had indicted her in a court of law, effectively branding her a cheater. That same man who once professed undying love now stood ready to tear her reputation apart. She spent days in tears, ignoring calls and texts from everyone except James and Rachel. Meanwhile, Maxwell made cryptic statements whenever cameras were around, claiming he was seeking truth to protect the Harrington family name. One afternoon, Tessa's friend Rachel arrived with an attorney in tow, Sarah Duvall, a bright, no-nonsense legal mind who specialized in family law. Tessa offered them tea in the penthouse's once cozy living room. Now, the space felt claustrophobic under the weight of Maxwell's absence. "We need to craft a strategy," Sarah said bluntly, after Tessa tearfully recounted the saga. "Maxwell's allegations are serious, but they're based on flimsy evidence. We can counter them." Tessa struggled to find her voice. "He has pictures of me with James completely innocent, but they look incriminating." She paused, voice trembling. "What if that's enough to cast doubt on me? I don't have any proof I never cheated." Rachel, sitting close, patted Tessa's knee. "We can't prove a negative, but we can question the authenticity of his so-called evidence. And if Maxwell has skeletons in his closet, we can bring them out too." A flicker of memory sparked in Tessa's mind. She thought about the occasional rumors she'd heard of Maxwell's own dalliances, hushed by NDAs and hush money. But she had never seen anything concrete except maybe, just maybe, the sudden presence of Victoria Hayes in his life. The late nights, secret smiles, and business trips accompanied by her. Tessa's heartbreak deepened with the suspicion that Maxwell himself might be guilty of what he was accusing her of. Sarah's eyes narrowed in thought. Even if Maxwell is cheating, we need hard proof. Otherwise, his team will bury us with more rumors. "Tessa, do you have access to anything that could hint at an affair on his side?" Tessa shook her head uncertainly. "He's been so careful, always stepping out when I'm away, or claiming he's at an investor meeting. If something is there, I don't know how to find it." Rachel chimed in. "Don't forget the staff at Harrington Media. They might know about Victoria's closeness to Maxwell. Maybe there's an unguarded phone conversation or travel itinerary that could help." Encouraged, Sarah outlined the plan. "Gather any snippet that might show Maxwell's hypocrisy records, eyewitness accounts, suspicious credit card charges." Meanwhile, they would cast doubt on his accusations by showing Tessa's stable character, philanthropic work, and highlighting the absurdity of the claims, given that Tessa rarely left the penthouse unless for medical checkups. Thus, Tessa took the first steps to defend herself, though her heart still felt battered. She had to steel herself for a bruising court fight. The final blow would come if they discovered that Maxwell indeed harbored his own secret affair. And if that revelation emerged in a public courtroom, Tessa might salvage her name or gain vengeance. If that's what it took to protect her unborn child, Sarah Duvall wasted no time. She assembled a small team of private investigators and digital forensics experts, quietly funded by Tessa's father figure from her foster home days, Morgan Madsen, who insisted on helping. Though Tessa was proud, she couldn't refuse. Morgan was no multimillionaire, but he'd set aside some savings for Tessa's wedding that she never used, and now he directed that money toward uncovering the truth. They focused on Maxwell's recent patterns. He frequently traveled to cities where Harrington Media had affiliate stations, especially Chicago and Los Angeles. Tessa's investigators discovered that Victoria Hayes often accompanied him on these trips, though official logs listed her presence as assistant or media consultant. The real smoking gun, however, proved elusive. None of the photographs or receipts explicitly showed an affair, just a suspiciously close working relationship. Undeterred, the investigators probed deeper. Through a leaked email chain, they uncovered a series of personal communications from Maxwell's official Harrington Media account to an anonymous email ID that turned out to be Victoria's private address. The messages started formally about business, but turned flirtatious over time. "I can't wait for our next trip." Or, "You looked stunning at the dinner." Some even hinted at the time we spent in suite 1203. Sarah's eyes lit up reading them. They were not a direct confession of adultery, but close enough to raise eyebrows. Tessa, heartbreak warring with anger, breathed heavily as Sarah read the messages aloud. "It's him," Tessa whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "He's the one who's cheating. How could he accuse me?" Sarah patted Tessa's shoulder. "We're on the right track. If we can tie these communications to a specific date and location, we might find security footage or hotel records that show them entering the same room." Relentlessly, the team traced Maxwell and Victoria's stay at a luxury hotel in Los Angeles 3 months prior. The investigators convinced a sympathetic ex-employee to share old surveillance logs. And there it was, Maxwell and Victoria, stepping off the elevator, together, late at night, heading to the penthouse suite. The date corresponded with one of those flirty emails. Better yet, the employee provided a snippet of CCTV footage that clearly showed Maxwell leaning in to kiss Victoria in the hallway. When Tessa first saw this video, she felt physically ill. She had spent countless nights alone, worried about Maxwell's attitude, while he carried on this secret affair. Waves of betrayal overwhelmed her, but then a steely resolve emerged. She would not let Maxwell's lies prevail. Sarah was elated. "This is gold. If Maxwell wants to claim you're the cheater, we can blow his case apart with actual evidence of his affair." They prepared carefully, however. Sarah advised Tessa to remain calm and keep the revelations secret until the opportune moment in court. Maxwell's legal team was still confident they could shame Tessa. Their claims hinged on questionable photographs with James Carter and doctored phone logs that implied constant contact. They expected Tessa to fold under pressure, perhaps settling out of court to save face. But Tessa wouldn't settle. Her unborn child's future was at stake. The thought of Maxwell controlling the child's life, armed with a false narrative, fueled Tessa's determination to see this through. She steeled herself for the upcoming hearing, clutching the damning video like a shield. The day she walked into that courtroom, she would no longer be the frightened, silent victim. She would be a mother, defending her child and her honor, and Maxwell would be forced to watch his carefully constructed lie unravel. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived, accompanied by a media circus. Cameras swarmed the courthouse steps, clamoring for statements. Tessa, dressed in a modest black maternity dress, kept her gaze down to avoid the flashing bulbs. Sarah Duvall guided her inside, a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Meanwhile, Maxwell breezed through a different entrance, flanked by his high-profile legal team. His face betrayed no emotion as he marched toward the courtroom. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Tessa saw Maxwell for the first time in weeks, seated across from her, eyes dark with resentment. She wondered how this man, once so tender, could become her enemy. A judge in traditional robes presided over a polished mahogany bench, calling the hearing to order. Maxwell's attorneys kicked off, painting Tessa as an opportunist who seduced her way into the Harrington fortune. They insisted there was strong reason to doubt the paternity of the unborn child, citing suspicious communications with James Carter. They displayed the damning photographs of Tessa, tearful in a cafe, James holding her hand. "Your Honor," Maxwell's lead counsel intoned gravely, We seek a court order for mandatory paternity testing and immediate protective measures to safeguard the Harrington estate from fraudulent inheritance claims." Tessa gripped the arms of her chair, her chest tightening as scornful murmurs rippled through the audience. She locked eyes with Maxwell, hoping to find even a flicker of guilt or remorse. His expression remained icy. Then came Sarah's turn. She rose, projecting a calm confidence. "Your Honor, Miss Tessa Harrington vigorously denies these spurious allegations. My client is eager to prove her child's legitimate parentage once it's born. However, we have compelling evidence that Mr. Harrington is acting in bad faith, seeking to defame his wife while concealing his own misconduct." A hush fell as Sarah methodically shredded Maxwell's arguments. She pointed out the benign nature of Tessa's meeting with James Carter, introducing text messages that showed they talked about Tessa's philanthropic projects, not romance. "Even if my client sought emotional support from a friend," Sarah said coolly, "that doesn't equate to an affair." The tension mounted when Sarah announced, "We have additional evidence that Mr. Harrington engaged in conduct far more damning than any photo of a hand held in a cafe." She gestured to a large monitor behind the counsel's table. "We would like to introduce Exhibit D, a video from a Los Angeles hotel security cameras, dated 3 months ago." At once, Maxwell's attorneys objected, claiming irrelevance, invasion of privacy, and so forth. But the judge, intrigued, allowed Sarah to proceed. In a room thick with anticipation, the lights dimmed and the video played. Grainy but unmistakable, it showed Maxwell and a woman recognized as Victoria Hayes stepping off a hotel elevator, stepping close, exchanging a passionate kiss before entering a suite together. A collective gasp echoed in the courtroom. Whispers spread among spectators like wildfire. Tessa closed her eyes, exhaling shakily as Sarah hammered the point. "Mr. Harrington, who claims his wife is unfaithful, is clearly the one engaging in an extramarital liaison." All eyes turned to Maxwell, his jaw tensed, face reddening. The attorneys on his side scrambled, trying to pivot. They claimed the footage was taken out of context or possibly doctored. But the date stamp, plus internal hotel logs verifying Maxwell's booking of the same suite, eradicated their arguments. The judge eyed Maxwell sternly. "You filed these claims against your wife, yet it appears you've withheld relevant information about your personal conduct. This undermines your credibility." A subdued hush reigned. Maxwell, pinned under the judge's scrutiny, struggled to keep composure. Tessa sat still, tears of relief and hurt sliding down her cheeks. She had dreaded this confrontation, but found an odd sense of liberation in exposing his hypocrisy. Their marriage was surely beyond repair, yet her name would not be so easily smeared. When the hearing ended, the judge ordered a temporary dismissal of Maxwell's claims, pending further review. He also reprimanded Maxwell for any future attempts to harass Tessa, cautioning that the court would not tolerate frivolous or vindictive litigation. Tessa, exhausted but triumphant, left the courtroom with Sarah by her side, ignoring the frenzied press. A part of her soul still mourned the marriage that once promised such love. But for now, she had won a critical battle, unveiling the truth in the most public way possible. In the wake of Tessa's courtroom victory, the media latched onto the sensational reversal. Headlines that once questioned Tessa's fidelity now blared, "Harrington caught cheating, pregnant wife vindicated." A swirl of paparazzi documented Maxwell's every move, chasing him through city streets, shouting questions about Victoria. Tabloid columns tore him apart, calling him a hypocrite for accusing his pregnant wife when he himself was engaged in an affair. Maxwell's business empire took a public relations hit. Stock prices in Harrington Global dipped, as some investors worried about a scandal that might lead to costlier lawsuits. A few board members privately grumbled about Maxwell's recklessness, hinting that the Harrington brand thrived on an image of integrity that he'd tarnished. Maxwell responded by cloistering himself at home or in private clubs, accompanied by a skeleton staff of loyalists. Tessa, meanwhile, found herself receiving an outpouring of sympathy. Strangers left messages of support on her social media pages. Philanthropic organizations she'd partnered with extended invitations for speaking engagements about resilience and empowerment. She felt overwhelmed by the sudden shift from reviled scapegoat to sympathetic figure. Rachel Townsend teased her gently. "You're the new face of the unstoppable mother, Tess. Embrace it." But Tessa still carried deep emotional wounds. The baby's birth was looming, and she was effectively alone. She had once envisioned Maxwell by her side in the delivery room, sharing the wonder of their child's first cry. That dream lay in tatters. Instead, she busied herself setting up the nursery in the penthouse, still the Harrington home, though Maxwell had retreated to a separate wing. They exchanged minimal words, mostly about logistic matters or doctor appointments. His presence, when it occurred, was overshadowed by shame. He couldn't look her in the eye. Victoria Hayes, the revealed mistress, attempted to salvage her career. She gave a carefully orchestrated interview on a gossip show, painting herself as a misunderstood colleague who fell in love with Maxwell under complex circumstances. She insisted they had ended it once Tessa's pregnancy advanced. Few believed her spin, especially after the video. Her credibility sank, and rumors circulated that Harrington Media was quietly severing ties with her. She might have once yearned to take Tessa's place, but now found herself persona non grata in Maxwell's circle. In a rare moment, Maxwell tried to approach Tessa for a conversation. She was in the nursery, arranging plush toys on a shelf. He hesitated in the doorway, his voice subdued. "How are you feeling?" Tessa didn't turn around. "Fine," she replied tersely. He cleared his throat. I wanted to apologize again for everything. I was so convinced you were. I let my fears drive me. I hurt you." She placed a teddy bear on the shelf, her shoulders stiff. "You didn't just hurt me, Maxwell. You dragged me through public humiliation. You put the baby at risk with all that stress." He swallowed. "I know. I wish there was a way to undo it. I can't change the past, but maybe I can be there for you, for our child, in the future." Tessa turned slowly, her expression guarded. "The only reason you're sorry is that you got caught. If I hadn't found that video, you'd still be accusing me, still controlling me. This child will need a father, yes, but I don't know if that means you." His face twisted in regret. "I understand. I'll respect whatever you decide." She inclined her head, dismissing him with a glance back at the toys. An uneasy hush draped the room. Maxwell lingered for a moment, then quietly left. Tessa exhaled, a swirl of emotions clogging her chest. She recognized the flicker of sincerity in his apology, but it might be too little, too late. The baby's approach gave her little time for illusions. She had to think pragmatically, co-parenting arrangements, finances, and her own emotional well-being. The man she once adored had systematically shattered her trust. Even his regret did not guarantee redemption. Despite the dramatic video evidence and the subsequent dismissal of Maxwell's initial lawsuit, the Harrington saga was not over. Maxwell's legal team regrouped to salvage some measure of control over the narrative. They argued that Maxwell's fatherly rights needed protection and filed new motions seeking shared custody once the child was born. Tessa, on her lawyer's advice, responded with her own petition to separate and to formalize spousal and child support, ensuring she could raise her baby without threat or manipulation. The stage was set for a final courtroom confrontation to determine the future. Cameras buzzed outside the courthouse. By now, the public had largely turned against Maxwell, but some still saw Tessa's swift dethronement of his accusations as cunning. For Tessa, the trial was exhausting, and she was nearly full term in her pregnancy. Her belly had grown considerably, making the walk up the courthouse steps a challenge. Sarah Duval led Tessa inside, while Maxwell arrived with a trimmed-down legal entourage. He looked weary, perhaps weighed down by public scorn. In the gallery, reporters craned their necks for any sign of drama. Rachel Townsend and James Carter sat behind Tessa, ready to offer moral support. Judge Carol Hastings, an experienced family court judge, began the proceedings with a firm tone. She acknowledged that Maxwell's accusations of adultery had been debunked and recognized that Tessa had proven Maxwell's affair with Victoria. Now, the judge explained, the issue was how to arrange custody and financial responsibilities if Tessa moved forward with separation or divorce. Maxwell's attorney rose to speak. He attempted to paint Maxwell as remorseful yet deserving of paternal access, noting that fatherhood should not be withheld due to a private mistake. Tessa clenched her jaw at the euphemism. Maxwell's attempt to brand his public slander as merely a mistake stung. Then Sarah delivered Tessa's stance. My client does not intend to deny Maxwell visitation, provided it occurs in a safe, stress-free environment for the child. However, we seek sole legal custody initially, given Maxwell's pattern of emotional abuse and false allegations that placed severe strain on Tessa's health and the child's well-being. At that, murmurs swept the courtroom. Maxwell's expression tightened. He gazed at Tessa, who looked away. The arguments continued for hours. The defense hammered that Tessa was overreacting, while Sarah pointed out the psychological and public damage Maxwell inflicted. Finally, Judge Hastings called both parties into her chambers to talk privately and attempt at an amicable resolution. Tessa, anxious, sat in a conference room with Maxwell, their lawyers, and the judge. She felt the baby move, reminding her that time was short. "Mr. Harrington," the judge said pointedly, "you put your wife through extraordinary stress, risking the health of your unborn child. That weighs heavily on the question of sole custody." Maxwell exhaled shakily. "I realize I was wrong, Your Honor. I lost control, but I love my child. I need a chance to be a father." Tessa's voice was quiet but resolute. "A father who lies, who humiliates me publicly." She looked Maxwell in the eye. "Our baby deserves better." He stared at the floor. In that moment, he seemed deflated. "I know," he whispered. "I'll accept whatever arrangement ensures the baby is provided for. I only ask for some visitation, something. I can't walk away entirely." The judge observed them both. After a thoughtful pause, she proposed a compromise. Tessa would retain primary custody with structured visitation for Maxwell, under guidelines to protect Tessa from harassment. Additionally, Maxwell would pay substantial child support and spousal support, given Tessa's pregnancy and the emotional turmoil. If Maxwell demonstrated consistent, respectful behavior, the arrangement could be revisited after the child's birth. Tessa nodded slowly. She yearned to erase Maxwell from her life, but the baby's best interests came first. Legally, the father had rights. Morally, Tessa knew she couldn't simply vanish. And though her heart still burned with betrayal, she recognized that a healthy father-child relationship might be possible if Maxwell truly changed. The judge formalized her ruling in court, concluding the Harrington legal spectacle. Cameras flashed as Tessa emerged, exhausted, but steadied by Sarah's supportive arm. Maxwell left via a side door, ignoring the reporters shouting for comment. This time, he wasn't striding with bravado. The scandal had cut him down to size in the public eye. Barely a week after the court's final orders, Tessa experienced labor pains. It happened late at night in the penthouse, where she still resided for convenience. while Maxwell lived in a separate suite on another floor. She tried to remain calm as contractions began. Rachel Townsend, who was sleeping over to keep Tessa company, rushed to help. They called Dr. Lund, who advised heading to the hospital immediately. Within minutes, Tessa found herself in a luxury hospital suite courtesy of the Harrington insurance plan, but the environment felt anything but comfortable. Contractions ramped up, each wave of pain hitting harder. She clutched Rachel's hand, sweat trickling down her brow. Amid the controlled chaos, Maxwell appeared at the hospital. Tessa's first instinct was anger she hadn't called him, but she recognized that under the court's arrangement, he had a right to be present for the birth if she permitted. She stared at him, her expression torn between fury and vulnerability. Another contraction tore through her, leaving her gasping. Gently, Maxwell approached. "Do you want me in the room, or should I wait outside?" he asked, voice uncharacteristically soft. She saw genuine concern etched into his features, not the old controlling glare. For a moment, Tessa hesitated. The father of her child stood there, eyes reflecting regret, maybe love. She thought of how alone she felt. Even though anger still simmered, she found herself nodding. "Stay," she whispered, tears mingling with sweat. "But you follow my rules. No stress, no fights." He nodded earnestly. "I promise." Over the next 12 hours, Tessa labored. The pain was excruciating, yet a fierce determination drove her. Maxwell remained by her side, unbelievably gentle, offering water, cool cloths, and words of encouragement. Rachel hovered near, providing moral support and ensuring Maxwell stayed respectful. When the final stage of labor arrived, Tessa screamed through the contractions, tears streaming as Dr. Lund coached her to push. Maxwell's hand gripped hers, and though she considered letting go, she ended up squeezing him tighter. In that surreal moment, she needed every ounce of support, no matter the source. Finally, with one last cry, the baby arrived, a tiny girl. Dr. Lund cleared the infant's airway, and the delicate wail of new life filled the room. Tessa collapsed back onto the pillows, relief washing over her. Maxwell's face was awash in tears he didn't bother to hide. "It's a girl," Dr. Lund announced, placing the newborn in Tessa's arms. The baby squirmed, eyes tightly shut, mouth puckering in an uncertain cry. Tessa's heart swelled. All the betrayal, fear, and heartbreak receded in that instant, replaced by awe and love for this fragile little being. She named her Evelyn Rose Harrington. Maxwell repeated the name under his breath, voice breaking. Tessa allowed Maxwell a moment to cradle Evelyn, though she watched him warily. She noticed tears dripping onto the baby's blanket. He whispered, "Hello, Evelyn. Daddy's here." The tenderness in that moment was almost too much to bear. Tessa felt her chest ache with complex emotions, love for her daughter, heartbreak over how her marriage collapsed, and a faint hope that maybe fatherhood could trigger real change in Maxwell. That night, Tessa cradled Evelyn while Maxwell slept in a chair, arms folded as if afraid to approach unless invited. She recognized the sincerity of his devotion to the baby, but trust between them was shattered. Still, the presence of this new life overshadowed everything else, providing at least a fleeting sense of peace. The media might speculate, society might gossip, but Tessa and Evelyn had each other, and that bond was unbreakable. Bringing Evelyn home triggered a whirlwind of changes. The penthouse, once filled with tension, now echoed with the soft coos and occasional cries of a newborn. Tessa alternated between exhaustion and wonder. Rachel had arranged for a part-time nurse to help, though Tessa insisted on doing most motherly duties herself. Maxwell, under the court's visitation arrangement, arrived daily, tiptoeing around Tessa like a cautious guest in his own home. He brought fresh flowers, plush toys, and offered to handle 3 a.m. feedings if Tessa wanted rest. She appreciated the gesture, but found it impossible to forget the storm he unleashed on her. More than once she caught him staring at Evelyn with tears in his eyes, as though the weight of his mistakes was finally sinking in. Victoria Hayes was effectively gone from Maxwell's personal sphere, or so Tessa heard. Word had it that Harrington media let her go, citing budget cuts. Tabloids occasionally ran stories about her, now cast as the scandalous mistress who might pen a tell-all book. Maxwell dismissed any mention of her, focusing solely on Evelyn. Tessa took cautious relief that the drama with Victoria was over, though the emotional scars remained. Despite the new equilibrium, Tessa asked her lawyer, Sarah Duval, to proceed with legal separation. She refused to keep living in limbo, uncertain if Maxwell's regret could heal the wounds of his betrayal. Sarah filed the necessary papers, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional distress from Maxwell's false accusations. One evening, Maxwell approached Tessa while she was rocking Evelyn to sleep. He cleared his throat quietly. "Tessa, can we talk?" She glanced at him, then at the baby, whose eyelids were drooping. With a nod, she set Evelyn in the crib. They moved into the living room, the city lights shining through floor-to-ceiling windows. "I see the separation papers," Maxwell began, voice trembling with sadness. "I know you're done with me, but I had to say I'm sorry again, for everything. If I could rewrite the past, I would." Tessa inhaled slowly, arms crossed. "I don't doubt you're sorry, but I can't forget that you dragged me into court, publicly calling me a cheater. You threatened to take away my baby. No vow means anything after that." He lowered his gaze. "I understand. Please let me do right by Evelyn. I want to be a father she can look up to." Tessa's eyes misted. "Evelyn deserves that, but it doesn't fix what you did to us." She paused, wiping a tear. "I used to dream of us raising her together in love. Now, the best we can do is co-parent. Maybe we can reach a civil friendship for her sake." Maxwell swallowed, nodding. "I'll accept any boundary you set. Just let me be present for her milestones. Let me show you and her that I'm not just some monster." In that moment, Tessa sensed a genuine humility in Maxwell that she'd never seen before. He was no longer the controlling magnate or cunning manipulator, just a man who'd lost everything except this glimmer of hope in fatherhood. She felt a pang of compassion, but also remembered the cost of letting her guard down. "Time will tell," she said softly. "For now, focus on Evelyn. That's all I ask." A full year slipped by in a whirl of diaper changes, tense silences, and glimmers of hope. Evelyn, now a bubbly toddler, became the center of Tessa's universe. In the wake of court battles and Maxwell's public disgrace, the media's frenzy waned, replaced by cautious curiosity over whether the Harringtons would reconcile or permanently part ways. Despite lingering anger, Tessa allowed Maxwell to see Evelyn regularly. He arrived punctually, arms loaded with new toys, and never overstepped the boundaries she set. Over time, Tessa noticed a shift in him. The frenetic, domineering side gave way to a humble father who actually listened. He no longer brushed aside her concerns about parenting or demanded her immediate forgiveness. Instead, he simply showed up patient and contrite. Meanwhile, Tessa found renewed purpose in philanthropy, launching a program to help foster children transition into adulthood. Freed from the constant shadow of suspicion, she thrived as an advocate, drawing on her own experiences. Public sentiment turned sympathetic, hailing her resilience. Even Maxwell's once skeptical board members praised her positive influence on the Harrington name. Gradually, Tessa and Maxwell shared civil moments, a casual lunch with Evelyn in the park, a polite exchange about holiday plans. For Tessa, trust remained scarred by betrayal, yet she sensed Maxwell's genuine effort to atone. Though still living apart, they began collaborating on small events, charities for children's education. Evelyn's second birthday. At each occasion, they navigated conversation without bitterness, forging a fragile semblance of harmony for their daughter's sake. And so, the final chapter of their once shattered marriage settled into a measured peace. Their lives intertwined around Evelyn, who bound them in ways no courtroom drama could break. Whether Tessa might ever fully open her heart to Maxwell again remained uncertain. But for now, they stood side by side, wiser, chastened, and motivated by love for the child whose laughter had illuminated the darkness they once called home. And so ends the tumultuous story of Maxwell and Tessa Harrington, a marriage undone by suspicion and betrayal, yet ultimately reshaped by redemption and the bond of their child. Tessa's strength to expose her husband's affair in court not only preserved her dignity, but also forever changed Maxwell's view of fatherhood and love. Their journey reminds us that trust, once shattered, cannot be rebuilt by words alone, but through humble actions and unwavering commitment. If you've been captivated by this real-life drama of twisted accusations, surprising revelations, and the triumphant resilience of a pregnant wife scorned, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support enables us to continue bringing you powerful stories of heartbreak, hope, and hard-won redemption in life's most challenging moments. Thank you for watching.